Your work covers so much ground and does so with originality and depth. It's kind of hard to find a place to start. I felt like the blank slate was as good as any since it's so fundamental to so many other ideas. For those not familiar with the term, the blank slate is the very popular idea that the human mind is a blank page, tabula rasa, as John Locke termed it, and that all of its content and structure comes from the environment, from culture, socialization, experience, and so forth. The idea swept through academia and the social sciences in the 20th century. It was part, I think, of a universalist conception of mankind. It basically held that if humans were not that different, then we should all have equal rights. But slowly it started casting a larger and larger shadow and became something like you can't notice any inherent difference between groups or individuals because doing so would be taking a dangerous step back towards discrimination. And so here we are, we have to sort of think we're all the same. And your book is basically a thorough debunking of this idea. Why is the blank slate not a good idea? And from your perspective, is it a case of political and moral ideas, well intentioned as they may be, interfering with scientific ideas and the pursuit of truth?
Yes, that was a major theme of the blank slate. It came out, almost 23 years ago, although then published in a new edition about 4 or 5 years ago. And it tried to argue against the tendency to impose a particular view of how the world works as a shortcut to certain moral principles. I think it's a bad idea, both because the moral principles can stand on their own and ought to stand on their own. You should be clear about the reasons for moral principles, like it is evil to discriminate on the basis of race or sex. One shouldn't be callous or indifferent or abusive of children. People should be held responsible for their actions. We should try as far as we can to change our institutions so that they're more just and more encouraging of human prospering. All of these are impeccable moral principles. But in order to prosecute them, there has been a tendency, as I documented in the book, to make claims such as there are no differences between men and women, there are no differences between individuals in intelligence and personality. We can make decisions through some mysterious process called free will that has nothing to do with the physiology of the brain, that we are all inherently unselfish and cooperative and generous and peaceful. I argue that these empirical claims are false, but it doesn't mean that we should sacrifice our commitment to equality and social improvement. Some of these just depend on moral principles that we ought to be able to articulate and safeguard, such as that it is immoral to penalize an individual based on the statistics of the group that they belong to. It's just unjust. Or that because human nature is complex, and that is a major theme of all of my writings, we're not blank slates, but we don't just have one thing in our brain. It's a complex interplay of many subsystems. Even if people do have some antisocial, rather nasty urges, people are competitive, they're vengeful, they're lustful, they're self-deceiving, they're subject to many fallacies and biases. But that's, in addition to all of those lamentable parts of human nature, there are also what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. We also have a capacity for self-control. We don't have to act on all our impulses. We have a faculty of reason. We can try to solve problems like violence or war. We have a sense of empathy. It doesn't kick in automatically for everyone, but we can try to expand it beyond our local clan and tribe. So human nature gives us a lot to work with, and the moral imperative of trying to make things better can coexist with a realistic understanding that there is such a thing as human nature. Those are the themes of the blank slate. And then I try to work them out for a number of particular cases like violence, like politics, like bringing up children, like the sexes, and the arts, among other things.
It's usually religious or deeply ideological societies that work this way with these sort of broad, rigid preconditions to truth, or which take moral principles and sort of port them over to empirical reality, and then either prohibiting or attacking or shaming any evidence that would contradict or even nuance the official doctrine. I'm curious about your thoughts on a hypothesis, and many people have had this idea that when a society loses religion, as broadly speaking, the West did with the Enlightenment and so forth, you don't just go straight to pure reason and science. Often a political ideology steps in to sort of fill the void instead.
Well, that can sometimes happen, and political ideologies sometimes take on some of the worst features of religion, such as imposition of an ideology, policing of heretics, uh, establishing loyalty to the coalition by verifying unfalsifiable beliefs, or sometimes even absurd beliefs, because anyone can say that rocks fall down instead of up, but to affirm that that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, that sex is simply assigned at birth and has nothing to do with biology. You got to be a real committed believer to affirm beliefs like that. It's not just something you can open your eyes and see. You've got to have, as we sometimes say, drunk the Kool-Aid to believe those things. So,
Mhm.
some of the features of religion, probably because they are embedded in human nature,
Drank the
can
Kool-Aid.
manifest
Yeah.
themselves as loyalty to the creed of some deity, but it can also be loyalty to other creeds.
Yeah, and it's always struck me as odd because I wonder what you think. To me, there is such a simple, almost like Aristotelian basis for equal rights, and it's not that we're all the same. If we're all unique and different, and if groups are different, and you mentioned the great social science taboo is that no two groups will be identical, and it's like not something that we can sort of bring up. But if groups and individuals do have differences and unique characteristics, perhaps the basis for equal rights is to allow them to pursue those and to express those, not to sort of go in a direction of everybody being the same. And as you very argue very persuasively in the book, we do not need to affirm sameness in order to get to the idea of equal rights morally or politically.
Yeah, there's a tendency to equate fairness with sameness, and they're not the same thing. In fact, the fact that we are different calls all the more strongly for recognition and protection of those differences, starting with differences of opinion. Some people hold different beliefs, sometimes because of what they've been exposed to, sometimes because of the internal train of thought that brings them to where they are now, sometimes because of differences in temperament. Some people really are constitutionally more liberal and open, or more protective of the status quo and conservative.